What is up, everybody? I'm NoLucksGiven, and today we are going to be continuing our coverage of the Great League in the GamePress Go Battle League Gauntlet. Now, if you're not already familiar with the Gauntlet, you can check out my previous video on the channel where I break down exactly what the format of this tournament is and the competitors, but today we're going to look at two of these competitors' games, the first being TForgery and the second being myself. So my own games will be at the end of the video, but first I want to take a look at TForgery's games. Looking at TForgery's team here, he is going to be rocking the Alolan Raichu with Umbreon and Vigoroth as his two options in the back. And seeing an Umbreon on the other side of the battle from him against Lorma, he is going to immediately switch out into an Umbreon of his own. Obviously, Vigoroth would be pretty good here, but if he switches just directly into that, obviously he is going to get counter-switched. So Lorma stays in it for a second before switching to Galvantula, which can threaten this Umbreon with Bug Buzz, but Galvantula does take a lot of damage, even just from neutral moves. It's a pretty fragile Pokemon. The reason Lorma switches into Galvantula here is because both that Meganium and that Umbreon are going to line up really well against Tyler's Alolan Raichu. So now we see Lorma go into the Meganium, and now Tyler knows all of Lorma's Pokemon. So from this point here, TForgery knows that his Alolan Raichu is not going to do well against this Meganium, and it is not going to do well against the Umbreon, which can basically just eat it alive here. So he's going to use some foul plays, and when his Umbreon dies, he goes back into the Alolan Raichu, and he doesn't shield this Frenzy Plant. Then we see Lorma switch into this Umbreon and use a foul play, and that just takes the Alolan Raichu out. Tyler just completely sacrificed it, and I think that's what winds up winning him the match. I think that Lorma wanted to kill that Alolan Raichu too quickly, and it really wasn't threatening anybody. So now Tyler is down to his Vigoroth against the Umbreon and the Meganium on the other side of the battlefield from him. But he does have some shields here which he'll use, and Vigoroth is just really good against Umbreon. He gets that out of the way, and then he is able to build up to another Body Slam and take out this Meganium. So he had a bad lead matchup and just kind of throws his Alolan Raichu away, which is his favorite Pokemon, but sometimes that is a sacrifice you have to make. Now going into TForgery's game against Cuddywow, he is up against Haunter, so immediately he has obviously got to switch out again. Haunter will just eat Alolan Raichu alive, so he switches to Vigoroth, gets counter-switched by an Azumaril, which is a really good switch from Cuddy. Obviously, both of Cuddy's other Pokemon will line up really well against Alolan Raichu, and Azumaril will line up really poorly against Alolan Raichu. So, yeah, that's a great switch from Cuddy there, but what Cuddy doesn't realize is that his Haunter is also going to line up really, really terribly against his opponent's Umbreon that he does not yet know about. So we're going to see some shields traded off in this matchup here. Here comes an Ice Beam from the Azumaril, which gets Tyler's second shield, so then he can counter the Azumaril down. Then Cuddywow has no choice but to bring in his Meganium. And once again, Tyler now knows both of his opponent's remaining Pokemon, so he definitely has an information advantage here. He switches into the Alolan Raichu, and that is going to eat a big earthquake from the Meganium, but it makes Meganium lose all of its energy. And Tyler doesn't even have a problem taking this Frenzy Plant here. He knows that if the Umbreon can just survive, the Haunter is going to have a heck of a time taking this Umbreon down. So Umbreon's going to take a Frenzy Plant. He did lose the CMP. He is going to go ahead and still finish off this Meganium here. And then the Haunter comes in, and the Haunter can throw some Shadow Balls, but it is not going to be able to get to a second Shadow Ball before Umbreon can foul play, and that foul play will just kill it in one shot. So there you go. Again, another example of TForgery not only losing the lead, but then just sacrificing this Alolan Raichu to the gods or to the energy of his opponent's Pokemon there, just taking a big earthquake, letting it go down, and finishing up with his remaining Pokemon. In Tyler's third game against Raven, we are going to see again that he loses the lead. So Raven is leading with Meganium, so Tyler will immediately switch out into Umbreon, and Raven should match this and switch to Azumaril as soon as he can, rather than taking too much damage on this Meganium here. The Azumaril is going to line up poorly against Alolan Raichu, and Azumaril lines up pretty favorably against Umbreon, so definitely want to get that Azumaril in. Raven is going for Ice Beams, though, trying not to get shielded with this switch in, and I don't think most players shield here when they are Umbreons anyways. Obviously there's the fear of play rough, but a lot of players just don't run the play rough, and Tyler correctly doesn't shield. And now we see a Hydro Pump, which also doesn't get shielded, so it's not the worst thing in the world. Tyler's going to go back into the Alolan Raichu, and from there we see a switch to Meganium. That's going to let Tyler now switch into Vigoroth, and here comes an Earthquake, which is going to get shielded by the Vigoroth. The Vigoroth then gets to counter farm that Meganium down, and it can throw some body slams off at this Azumaril, which it is going to get a shield. But Raven's got some shields to play with here for sure, and then we see a pretty big moment in the match here where Tyler builds up a bunch of energy, draws the shield out of Azumaril, and then just throws another body slam and kills the Azumaril anyways. Then we see Registeel from Raven. A big piece of metal here, though, nonetheless, and a Wild Charge deals a bunch of damage, and we're actually going to see a shield on the Flash Cannon here from TForgery, but the Registeel beats it to another charge move. So the Flash Cannon is going to take out the Alolan Raichu, but the Sparks did a little bit of damage, and then Vigoroth can come in and counter farm it down. So maybe that shield wasn't super important there, but the counter damage from Vigoroth meant that TForgery was still going to be able to finish that match strong. We are now going to look at Tyler's battle against myself, where he does manage to get a good lead. His Alolan Raichu is lined up against an Azumaril, and one of the things that I always think is funny, as you just saw there, is Tyler brought up his switch menu before I even did. And that is one of the funniest things about these really practiced trainers, that they know a switch is coming and they always load up the menu before I do, so they are super ready to make that switch. So that's something very cool to keep in mind when you get in a good leading matchup here. But I switched to Shiftry, he switched to Vigoroth, and Vigoroth is able to deal a bunch of damage with those counters. I then bring in Azumaril, and I don't mind Azumaril taking a few body slams because I know that it is going to die to Alolan Raichu pretty quickly. I then bring in Registeel because I think that I can farm the Vigoroth down before it gets to a Bulldoze, but he is able to get a Bulldoze off before I take him down. Then he brings in Alolan Raichu, and I got a bunch of energy, so I got to spend a Flash Cannon here. It's not very effective, and the Alolan Raichu is just really good against my team once the Shiftry is dead there. So the Alolan Raichu is going to be able to pretty easily clean things up. So that's what Tyler can do when he does have the lead advantage. He is able to win some of those ones as well. But yeah, definitely pretty cool how he's able to win so many bad leads, but I want to take a look at some of my games now. Those are Tyler's wins, so let's take a look at some of my games against some of those same opponents that Tyler just played as well. So speaking of losing leading matchups, first we're going to look at my game against Raven here, where he is leading with Meganium, and so I am going to build up a little bit of energy and then try to catch this Frenzy Plant with my Registeel. So this wastes a bunch of Raven's energy here, and you see he thinks about switching and doesn't. I think he would have been in a lot better position in this matchup if he did indeed actually switch, but he just decides to go for the Earthquake, which winds up being pretty good for him too. I thought it might have been a bait, so I did not shield. And then I finish off Meganium with my Flash Cannon. Azumaril is going to come in and farm me down, but I'm now going to have switch advantage when I bring in Shiftry. I will shield this Ice Beam here, and then when Raven switches to Registeel, I get to match that switch and switch to Azumaril. So, like I said, Raven is up a shield, but I don't think that it matters too much because I'm in such a good position. I'm in favorable matchups before and after this switch here. So Raven goes for a Flash Cannon, and I'm actually not going to shield this here with only one shield left. I'm thinking Raven's got 2 shields, I've got 1. I'm going to switch into my Shiftry, which just or not switch into, but let my Shiftry come out as my last remaining Pokemon, and Shiftry just generates energy so much faster than my opponent's Pokemon and gets to a charge move so much faster that I'm thinking I can get to 4 Leaf Blades before my opponent's Azumaril gets to 2 Ice Beams. So here comes the first Ice Beam, and I shield that. That's the only thing that I'm shielding in this match, and the only thing that my opponent is shielding is these Shiftry Leaf Blades here. And this is going to be super, super close, but I did overfarm on the Registeel a little bit, and we CMP tie on the Leaf Blade to Ice Beam, and I am able to take it out. So that was still a really close game, but both catching the Meganium and eating up that Meganium's energy, and then also over-farming on the Registeel just a little bit, and then bringing in Shiftry and being able to energy generate my opponent was definitely what allowed me to seal the deal there. Next, we're going to look at my game against Cuddywow, and while I don't really lose the lead in this matchup, I really don't like being against a Haunter. They are just so tricky, and they get me every single time, and here we go. Here is the Shadow Punch. I'm going to shield it, but if you've seen my Shiftry Destroys Haunter video, you might already be familiar with how I like to play this matchup. I build up some energy, and then I double Ice Beam with my Azumaril, and I trade 2 shields for 2 shields. After doing that, then the goal is to switch into Shiftry and Snarl it down. So the Haunter winds up dying so quick to these Snarls that he doesn't even have time to switch out. He just has to fire a Shadow Punch and lose his Haunter. He brings in Meganium after that, and Shiftry is lined up pretty well against Meganium, but obviously Cuddywow cannot bring in his Azumaril, so the Meganium comes in, and I'm going to be able to get off 2 foul plays on this Meganium, which just deal a bunch of damage. Shiftry lines up super well against my opponent's team here. He brings in Azumaril, and he is able to bubble farm me down before I can get to that Leaf Blade. But I have half of an Azumaril plus a Registeel to deal with my opponent's Azumaril here, so it is going to be basically impossible for him to get out of this one. He would need to have a Play Rough, Hydro Pump, Azumaril, and he would probably also still need to use a Sack Swap somewhere along the lines here and hope that I make a mistake. So bring in the Registeel to clean it up. And I believe the Azumaril is going to survive with a little bit of HP here, but if I bring my Azumaril back in, I will be able to take him down. So he has to overfarm me, which just means I can Flash Cannon again. So there wasn't really an avenue to victory there for him. Shiftry is just too strong, and Shiftry was really, really good against basically his entire team. Speaking of Shiftry being really strong, for the last battle in this video, we're going to look look at my game against your Calc Professor, who is leading with Shiftry, so I switch into Shiftry myself, which makes your Calc Professor switch into Deoxys Defense Form. Now, Deoxys Defense Form can deal a lot of damage with Counter as its fast move, but these foul plays are stab and super effective. So you can see right there, it deals a bunch of damage back to Deoxys as well. I'm going to go ahead and shield this Rock Slide because I do need to win switch advantage here. I need to make sure my Azumaril doesn't line up against my opponent's Shiftry, and I know that I can beat my opponent to a Leaf Blade before I die here. We do get a bunch of lag, which winds up being pretty awkward, and I'll talk some more about that after the match. But your Calc Professor wanted to bring in Shiftry. Instead, the game said, no, you are bringing in Registeel. So I go for a foul play here, and he does eat the foul play on his Shiftry. And then I switch into Registeel now that he is switch locked. So either way, I'm really just trying to avoid my Azumaril up against the Shiftry, but it didn't go quite how the Professor would have liked it to here. I am going to take a bunch of damage from these foul plays, though, and we are going to see a shield on the first one from the Professor, and then another foul play that's going to get a shield from me, and then at this point, your Calc Professor switches to Registeel and claims my Flash Cannon here. So really wonderful switch by him, and I try to sack swap into my Shiftry, but I just don't quite get it there, and he is able to Flash Cannon down my Registeel. That would have been really big. I could have come in and Focus Blasted his Registeel. Instead, the Flash Cannons are going to deal some damage to my Azumaril here, and I'm going to Hydro Pump down this Registeel and then just farm it down. So I still have this Shiftry as a sack swap. I bring it up right there, but he doesn't Leaf Blade me. He now decides to Leaf Blade my Azumaril, and I didn't even need to sack swap because it wasn't enough damage, and I just barely get to an Ice Beam before my opponent gets to a Leaf Blade there. That was a super, super close game against your Calc Professor, and we actually did play a rematched game because of the lag, and I won that one too. But this game was more exciting, so we decided this was the one we were going to show off here, despite the awkward lag that he got there in the middle. His idea was bring in Shiftry, and that way his Shiftry would be able to get a bunch of energy against my Shiftry. It would have still had to throw a Leaf Blade at some point in there, but it would have had more energy than it did otherwise against the Registeel. I think the battle still plays out roughly the same there because it winds up being Shiftry against Registeel, but he will try to do some Leaf Blades and some switching, and we get a longer battle there. But either way, I think that was a pretty good fight, and we still have some more really good fights left in the Great League. There's still 2 more videos going to be coming out in the subsequent days here for the Great League, following the GamePress Go Battle League Gauntlet, and if you haven't already seen yesterday's video where Ryan Swag sweeps 7-0, then go ahead and check that one out as well. But during the next 2 days, we're going to look at the videos from all of the other players' perspectives, and one player is going to get eliminated, and then we're moving on to Ultra League. So definitely subscribe and stay tuned if you want to check those videos out. Got some more great battles that we are going to showcase. That's going to be it, though, for this video today, guys. Thank you very much for watching. I'm NoLucksGiven. Peace!